Thank you very much for such a wonderful introduction. Thank you, Aspen Ideas Festival, for having me. It's really such a wonderful gathering of wonderful people and sharing ideas and experiences, which I think is wonderful, and we need more. We need more of that. So now is my chance to share some of my experiences and some of my ideas. And thank you all for coming. It's an early talk, 9 in the morning. You know, normally you wouldn't wake me up at this hour with a cannon, but I just came from Europe, so I'm jet lagged, so it's working out just fine. Perfect scheduling. And so I guess one of my tasks today is kind of to help you to wake up also. And maybe wake up myself a little bit as well. We'll see how it goes. My talk, I would like to talk about the AI, the artificial intelligence, which has been in the news a lot lately, and I'm sure you have seen it. Let me just put a couple of quotes for you. Some of the great minds today are very concerned about the developments with the artificial intelligence, such as Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking and Bill Gates. With AI, we are summoning the demon, as Elon Musk said, and it might be the biggest existential threat that we have right now. And Stephen Hawking says the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. Are they being alarmist? Yes. Okay, now we have a discussion. We'll see. Okay, so interesting thing is when we hear this, our mind immediately starts looping back to depictions of artificial intelligence in popular culture. Going back, for example, to the really amazing film by Stanley Kubrick, 2001, Space Odyssey, the notorious HAL 9000. Yes, I can hear you, Dave. This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it. Very prescient, I might say. 1968 is the year when Kubrick made this film. Or more recently, you may have seen another one, Ex Machina. And of course, I would be amiss if I did not mention Terminator Genesis, out in theaters today. I swear I have no contact with the marketing team for that movie. This is purely a coincidence. Everybody's like, yeah, right. And so, this is the unfortunate thing, I think, about this debate, that we fall back onto this discussion of the future and the robots. Are robots going to present some threat for us, and so on? And what I would like to talk about today is, the point I'd like to make is that actually, I think this conversation is very important. This discussion about artificial intelligence is very important, but not because it is a discussion about the robots and about the future, but because actually, secretly perhaps, it is a discussion about us, humans, and about the present, about now, about who we are, about who we want to be. But let's see the other side, so to speak. Let's see the other side. Ray Kurzweil, the great prophet of singularity. Singularity refers to technological singularity, perhaps. It refers to a time when the abilities of our computers, the supposed time when the abilities of our computers will equal those of humans. And according to Ray Kurzweil, this will happen around the year 2045. By that time, he says, we'll be able to fully back up our brains. We'll be able to think in the cloud. Some of us, I guess, already think in the cloud. We're going to put gateways to the cloud in our brains. By the late 2030s, human thought will be predominantly non-biological. These last three quotes, by the way, are from a conference in New York, which happened just 4 weeks ago. I'm not making this up. And earlier, he said, a couple of years ago, at another meeting, he said, we'll be uploading our entire minds to computers and become immortal by 2045. That's Ray Kurzweil. That's a nice picture of him. He looks like he just came from a casting call for the next James Bond movie, where he was supposed to play Dr. Evil. Or maybe Austin Powers, I don't know, maybe Mike Myers is not available anymore. Very nice picture. He's not alone in this. You can go online and Google Initiative 2045, the Avatar Project, which is a child of a Russian multimillionaire, Dmitry Itskov, my compatriot, as you might guess from my accent. I am from Russia, and he has this all figured out. There are 4 stages. The phases of Avatar Project. You know, preparing for this lecture, I spent some time searching online, and I've been reading all this stuff. So I'm so tired of this, honestly. So I'll just let you read it. I don't want to. I can't do it anymore, honestly. It's artificial brain which will transfer all of that somewhere. Let's just transfer somewhere ourselves. Let's just run away somewhere. Actually, so I just came from Paris, and you know, it's not just a discussion here in the United States. One of the major publications in France, Le Nouvel Observateur, just ran a cover story on artificial intelligence and transhumanism. And this fellow, Dmitry Itskov, was one of the main characters here. It says, the title here says, "The man who wants to kill death." And he's actually very serious about it. He's put a lot of money into this. He's organized several big meetings on this subject. Initiative 2045, that's what I'm talking about. And he actually is doing what he's talking about. He actually created an avatar in his own liking, in his own likeness, and his own liking as well, I suppose, which is kind of interesting because it's such a sad robot. It's such a sad robot. In Russian, it says the technology of immortality. I'm not sure I would like this kind of immortality, to be honest. It would be nice if we put a little smile on it, maybe make it a little more attractive, Maybe we would be seduced by that. But when you look at this picture, and frankly at this picture, I'm not so sold. I'm not so sold on these ideas. So, I'm a mathematician. And so I feel like I have to approach it with an open mind. This is what mathematics teaches you. And by the way, I'm so happy that Aspen Ideas Festival this year has mathematics as one of its tracks. We need more. We need to talk about mathematics. And one of the reasons why we need to talk about mathematics is precisely because this kind of issues are very closely connected to mathematics. And if we don't talk about it, if we don't talk about mathematics, if we run away from mathematics, if we are scared of mathematics, if we think we hate mathematics, what we are doing essentially is we are giving all the power to these people who espouse these ideas. The men of Silicon Valley, I call them. There are some women too, but unfortunately mostly men. I think actually it would do them a lot of good if more women came to Silicon Valley. But for now, it's really mostly men. And so we have to be aware, and we have to know what's going on so that we understand the fallacy of these ideas. And so what I wanted to do, in part to kind of prove to you that I am a mathematician, I wanted to draw something so I asked for this little notepad. But like I said, I have to approach it with an open mind because this is what mathematics teaches you. You never dismiss any ideas outright. And you realize that a lot of things are paradoxical. They are not, the easiest answer you have is usually not the right answer. But the paradox, as Richard Feynman famously said, is not really a paradox in reality. It's the tension between reality and your image of reality. So I say, okay, to what extent is it really possible to, say, transfer our mind to our brain to a computer, to a machine. So what does it mean? What is a computer? Computer is an algorithm. Computer works as an algorithm and as a Turing machine, a more technical term. So an algorithm is a step-by-step procedure. It's a step-by-step procedure. So one thing follows from another. Like imagine you're doing long division of two numbers. And so what they are saying implicitly, when they are saying that this robot can actually sort of come alive, that it can transfer the brain onto this robot, they're saying that the function of our brain, the functions of our mind, our consciousness, can actually be replicated by an algorithm. That's what it says. So that made me wonder, to what extent can we actually represent things by numbers? Because an algorithm ultimately is a sequence of zeros and ones. You can transform an algorithm into a binary code. So it's a line, it's a very long line, but a very long line of binary code, zeros and ones, right? So what they're saying is that I am just a sequence of zeros and ones, and each of you is just a sequence of zeros and ones. And it just then, from their point of view, becomes the technical issue of finding that sequence. So that made me wonder, to what extent can you actually do that? And I found this very simple example, which I think gives a very good illustration of what's going on. And this has to do with the concept of a vector. So I'm not going to overload you with a lot of math, don't worry. What is a vector? Think of this notepad as a part of a plane, of a two-dimensional plane, which sort of imagine it extending in all directions. And pick a point, say right here. So a vector is going to be, this vector is a directed segment like this. Connects the origin, which we fix once and for all, a special point, and some other point. This is a vector. So you can do the same for any other point. So for example, here is another vector. And these vectors, they have their own life. It's not just, they're not static, they're not just sitting here, but actually they can interact with each other, so to speak. Okay? So for example, you can add two vectors. There is a very simple rule, which you may remember, called parallelogram rule. So what you do is you kind of draw a line here parallel to this one, and you draw a line here parallel to this one, and then when they intersect, you get a new vector. Okay? And we say that this vector, the red one, is the sum, which is nice, by the way. So this is a good example of a self-referential loop. It's very important, by the way, also. I will come back to this. So, but, you know. So, but go back to vectors. This is the sum of these two vectors. Okay? You can also multiply vectors by numbers and so on. And these vectors, it's like a happy family. They just live there, and they have fun, and they can add them up, and then they can multiply, and they play with each other. And then, here's what happens. A mathematician comes and says, you know what, I'm going to introduce a coordinate system. I'm going to coordinatize you. Okay, what does it mean? It means that I'm going to draw two axes. I'll call this one X. My hair looks pretty good. That's nice. Even from the back, yeah, nice. I should do this more often. So, and then you have this one, which you'll call Y. And then, let's take the first vector. So what we can do is let me use another. Let's make it more colorful. So, let's drop a perpendicular here. And let's drop perpendicular here. So let's say that this is maybe, let's call this 1. So then this will be 2, this will be 3. And then this would be maybe, I want to say that's a little bit less, so maybe like 2.5. It doesn't matter. Maybe, let's say 2.5. And then, then we can say that this vector can be represented by this pair of numbers. The first one is 3. And the second is 2.5. Okay? So we studied this in school, we studied this in college, and so on. And this is a very useful idea, because once we do that, you can then emulate all the operations that I talked about, like addition of vectors, multiplication of vectors by numbers. You can emulate them with these numbers. For example, to add two vectors, you just add the first components and the second components. Right? So very convenient. You can program this stuff. And this surely is a sequence of zeros and ones you can convert into binary. But then you get so excited about this possibility of representing vectors by numbers, and you say, this is the vector, actually. There is no difference between this and this. But is it really true? Is it really true? The vector is there. The vector is there. The vector couldn't care less about our coordinate systems and all the shenanigans we're doing with those coordinate systems. The vector is just there. It exists. It's us who decided to represent it by numbers. And let's not forget that this involves a lot of choice, our free will, if you want, because I didn't have to make coordinates to go like this. I could also tilt the system, coordinate system. I could make it, like this. I don't want to draw to overload the picture, but you can imagine a coordinate, one axis going this way, one axis going that way. In fact, you learn that it's not even necessary for them to be perpendicular. So there are infinitely many ways to draw a coordinate system. And once you draw a coordinate system, you also have to choose the unit. Because if I choose a different unit, for example, this will not be 3, it will be 2. So what does it mean? It means that the same vector can be represented by any pair of numbers. By any pair of numbers. So how can you say that this vector is this pair of numbers? It's not. It's one particular representation which we have chosen. And let us never forget that. So this is a very good metaphor, I think, for what happens when we get too excited about our ability to represent things by numbers. That even a vector cannot be identified with a pair of numbers. Even a vector. Can I be identified with a sequence of numbers? Can you be identified with a sequence of numbers if even this simple thing cannot be identified in this way? If a vector could speak, and you came and asked him or her, what are your numbers? What are your numbers? The vector would be like, what? What are you talking about? I don't know anything about numbers. I am here. I am. So that's one illustration for you about how careful we should be when we talk about numerical representations. Let me give you another example. When we talk about if mathematicians had a Hall of Fame, he would be the greatest logician of all times. In my book, he is. Well, I suppose you could argue that Aristotle comes close. So maybe two of them will share the honor. But he's really one of the greatest logicians, and not just logicians, but mathematicians of all time. And in fact, he worked with Albert Einstein at the Institute for Advanced Study. And Einstein actually told his friends that the only reason Einstein, came to work was so that he would have a chance to walk home with Gödel and talk to him in the evening. A great mind of the 20th century, famous for his incompleteness theorem. It's going a little bit. Great, thank you. Actually, in fact, there are two incompleteness theorems. So I'm talking about the first one, which says basically that in any formal system. Now, what is a formal system? A formal system is something where you have a system of axioms, things which you accept as given from the outset, and rules of inference. Like if you have A as an assertion, like an axiom, and then A implies B, then B is also an assertion, is also a sentence, which you prove. So you start with axioms, you use rules of inference, and you produce step by step other statements or assertions, which you call theorems. So formal system works as an algorithm, and in fact there is essentially no difference between formal systems and algorithms. Now, what his incompleteness theorem, published in 1931, says is that if you have such a formal system, which one is sufficiently sufficiently sophisticated. It's a technical thing. It means that you can speak about whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all operations on them, and all the things we usually do with numbers. The technical term is piano arithmetic. That's number one. Number two, consistent. Consistent means that you cannot prove that it's not contradictory, your formal system. So you cannot prove simultaneously A and the negation of A. Because if you can prove A and negation of A, then you can prove every statement. So it's not so interesting. So suppose you have a sufficiently sophisticated and consistent formal system. Then his theorem, and this is a mathematical theorem, it's not some kind of a, guess or speculation. It is a mathematical theorem which is accepted by everyone on the planet Earth. It says that there will always be a statement which is true but cannot be proved within this system. In other words, truth cannot be formalized mathematically. Truth cannot be expressed by an algorithm, not because we are not sophisticated enough, not because we're stupid, we don't know how to do it. In principle, this is an inherent property of our logical thinking. Truth cannot be formalized. Maybe I'll tell you a couple of words about how to prove it, because it's a beautiful argument, absolutely beautiful argument. It goes to the old adage about the beauty of mathematics. David Henry Thoreau wrote that, we've heard so much about the beauty of mathematics, but very little of it has been sung, So let me sing a little bit about the beauty of mathematics, and I think this is one of the most beautiful theorems and proofs. The idea is a self-referential loop. It's exactly like the self-referential loop that you saw, where I can see me on the screen, and then and it goes on and on and on like this, you see. Liar's paradox. Consider the sentence. This sentence is a lie, where this means it refers to itself. You see. If you haven't seen this before, you might need a few seconds to figure it out, but it cannot be neither true nor false. Because if it's true, then you accept that it's true, then it says, I am a lie, but then it is false. Or if it's false, then it has to be true. So it cannot be either. It's a very interesting thing when you find it. And this, of course, has been known since ancient Greeks, I suppose. And he used the same idea, Gödel. He showed that if you have in your formal system whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, you cannot make the liar's paradox sentence in your formal system. But you can make sort of the next best thing. A sentence which refers to itself in this way. This sentence cannot be proved. And you see, so if you could prove it, then you would also prove that you cannot prove it. And that would mean that your formal system is inconsistent, because you would prove it and its negation. So if your system is consistent, formal system is consistent, or in other words, is sound, so it's not self-contradictory, then you cannot prove this. But then it's true. And it cannot be true. So here's a true statement, but it cannot be proved. Now, what to do? Well, in mathematics we say, well, it's not such a big deal, because so you get this statement, you can add it as an axiom. You can take this sentence and add it as a new axiom. So then you have a true statement which is proved, because axioms by definition are theorems. But then you obtain a new formal system. And in this new formal system, there will be another statement which you cannot reach by formal argument. It's like a horizon line. You can chase it and you can run after it. You can't reach the horizon line. Same thing here. So very beautiful argument. And so in fact, this is a very strong indication also of the fallacy of these ideas that we can replicate our consciousness by an algorithm, which is the same as a formal system. Roger Penrose, a great mathematician, has published a book in 1994, Shadows of the Mind. It's like a big book, like 500 pages. And he used Gödel's completeness theorem to give a detailed argument that there is something in our conscious thought process that eludes computation. We have access to mathematical truths that are beyond any robot's capabilities. Even mathematical thinking cannot be replicated by an algorithm. And in fact, if you talk to mathematicians, like myself, they will tell you that when we actually make a mathematical discovery, at that moment when we make a mathematical discovery, our thinking stops. Our thinking stops just for a second to let in an insight, to let our intuition, our instinct, our inspiration do its magic. That's what it means to be human. But if you've never experienced that, if you don't know that experience, you can take the cue from Penrose. In fact, another scientist, John Lucas, proposed a similar argument. So sometimes it's called Lucas-Penrose argument. Now, it's not a mathematical theorem. It's not a mathematical theorem. And it has been debated. Some people, because Penrose is very careful. He anticipated all possible arguments and he argues. It's very beautiful. It's really an amazing intellectual feat, what he had done in this book, in my opinion. But of course, you could always find people who will go and say, start nitpicking and like, well, he left the door open here, left the door open there. That maybe it's actually possible to replicate mathematical thought by an algorithm. So you see, this is where we come to maybe the main point. There isn't an algorithm, there isn't a theorem which will answer this question for us. There isn't an experiment which will tell me who I am. You can build a machine, $10 billion machine like LHC, It's not going to answer this question for me. I have to answer this question. I can take some clues from mathematics, from what mathematics tells me here or here, that it's not possible. Which, by the way, Ray Kurzweil never talks about Gödel's incompleteness. I actually tried to Google Ray Kurzweil, Gödel's incompleteness theorem. The only results I got were, pages where people were asking him the question, why you never address Gödel's incompleteness? Why are you so enthusiastically talking about transferring your mind, or everyone else's mind actually, to a machine, but you have not even given any consideration to one of the landmark achievements of mathematics of the 20th century? But it is actually something very systematic. We decided that we're just bags of elementary particles assembled in a certain way. Nothing more. Even great physicists who know about quantum mechanics, who understand that this cannot be true. They have fallen into this trap. I was just, I wanted to give you a quote, because just so you don't think I'm attacking a straw man, I want to give you a real quote from Carlo Rovelli, a great physicist. He's actually one of the good ones. These are my people, I represent. But, here is what he said. This is on edge.org in response to their annual question, just 6 months ago. The world is more or less just a large collection of particles arranged in various manners. This is just factually true, he says. Suitably arranged, it can reason like Einstein or think like Joplin. I'm not sure either of them would appreciate that. Not because of some black magic intervening. This is a physicist saying that. How about quantum mechanics? How about quantum mechanics, which tells us that there is no such thing as particles? And by the way, if you really think that this is made of particles, how about finding out that in each atom there is a nucleus, and this nucleus occupies more or less by a different estimate, but 10 to the minus 15 of the volume of the whole atom. In other words, the atom is 99.99999. Remember that old show of Ali G where you say 9999? It's 899 empty. So if you are serious about this, if you think that you are a collection of particles, or this even is a collection of particles, then you have to admit that most of it is a void. Because of course it's not. Because double slit experiment, when you shoot particles through these two slits, and you expect just two lumps on the screen, because that's what would happen if you shot actual pellets through these two. Just behind those two slits, you would have lumps. But you get interference pattern, because they are also waves. A particle, an electron, is not a particle. It also has another side. But it's not a wave either. Nor is it a particle and a wave. It's something else. It depends on our choice of observation. I wish I had more time to tell you that this kind of experiments also show you the fallacy of our usual understanding of time. You know, it's like, I think it's Yogi Berra said, the future is not what it used to be. But actually, neither is the present or the past. They don't exist, other than in our imagination. And you can prove it by experiments in physics. We don't talk about it so much, because it's very disconcerting. We prefer, for some reason, to say that I'm a bag of particles arranged in a certain way, I'm moving around, everybody is a bag of particles, and we're kind of like trying to find our way around, you know? Of course, that's not true. The reality is much more sophisticated than this. And so this made me wonder, why is it? What makes us want to believe this ideas? And I think we have to go all the way back to the 17th century, to Monsieur Descartes, René Descartes, the father of Cartesianism, and one could say of modern science. This idea of a split, of a duality between the body and the spirit, the body and the mind, this idea, je pense, donc je suis, I think, therefore I am. Someone said, in fact, it's the other way around. When I stop thinking, that's when I am. But we think about it. And if we think about it, then of course we think that that's how it is. The idea of this mechanistic idea of the world, of this sort of like billiard balls flying around, and us being these collections of billiard boards or balls or particles like this. It all goes back to 17th century. Cartesianism. And it was very important for us, for the humanity, because of course, these ideas came in protest against the authority, the authoritarian system of the church, of the state. It was a way to give agency to individuals who were oppressed during the Dark Ages. Because science is a great equalizer. 2 + 2 is 4. It doesn't matter how rich you are. Poor, rich, whatever religion, etc. It's the same. It's the same for all of us. It gives us dignity, agency. It was very important for humanity to find these ideas as a refuge from the trauma of the Dark Ages. But here we are 400 years later. The ideas which Descartes came up with to rebel against dogma, are now turning into dogma. And the irony of this is the following. In 17th century, most people believed in God. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not saying we should or should not believe in God. But there is one aspect of it. If you do believe in God, you accept that there is something ineffable, something that cannot be explained, something beyond all logic and reason. Are we really willing to sacrifice that? So today, perhaps we've lost that, and we decided to believe in science, which is great. Let's believe in science. But let's not, number one, make it into a new religion, and number two, let's not be so selective. Let's not believe in science as it was in the 17th century. Let's accept all of science, everything that science tells us. Let's accept all the achievements of science in the last 100 years. Quantum mechanics, relativity, Gödel's incompleteness. Let's take all of that into account. Why don't we do that? And a friend of mine, I discussed this with a friend of mine. He told me about the psychological condition, which is called anosognosia. So I've been reading about that. It's a very interesting psychological disorder when our logical somebody may have a severe disability, for example, paralyzed limb like an arm or a leg, but their mind, their logical mind, is convincing them that that's not the case. So you'd have a person who would have a paralyzed leg, but he would say, tonight I'm going to go to a dance club, tonight I'm going to, and then when you ask that person, so did you go? Oh, I couldn't go because I was busy. So in other words, you find excuses and arguments and you explain to yourself why you couldn't do it instead of facing the reality. Instead of facing the reality of your condition. Anosognosia. Is that becoming our common disease? What exactly are we trying to run away from? What exactly is it that we are afraid to face? And another point is they talk about the body as if it is this fixed object, like this podium. But we know from biology that the body is constantly rejuvenated. All the cells are constantly rejuvenated. It's this constant motion, of us and the universe. And we're all connected by this. It's not, you don't have to listen to a guru, you don't have to go to listen to spiritual teachers, who, by the way, have been saying that all along. Modern science tells us. So we believe in science? Great. Let's take that from our science. So when they say that they want to create an avatar, the said robot which I showed you earlier, that's a fixed thing. That is a fixed thing. So what do you want? You want to capture that. You want to capture that. But you can't capture a whirlpool. You can't capture a vortex in an ocean. It's there. It's moving. It's alive. But you can't just grab it, That's what happens, And of course, that would be fine, back to Mr. Kurzweil. And I don't want to appear like I'm picking on him, but here's what I read in The Guardian. He takes 150 pills a day because he would like to survive until 2045, which is, by his predictions, is a time when he will be able to transfer himself onto a robot and become immortal. But he has to survive until then,
Wouldn't it be disappointing if he died just 1 year before, 2044? Damn! I took 150 pills a day for so many years, and it didn't work. According to some reports, he's increased to 250. And by the way, he sells those pills online. It's called Ray and Terry. Kind of like Ben and Jerry, except with no fun. Now, of course, it's his personal matter, Anybody's free to take as many pills as they want. But, and he's also, it would be fine if he tried to build this robot in his garage. But in fact, he's trying to build this robot using the resources of the biggest company, information technology company in the world, called Google. In December of 2012, Mr. Kurzweil was appointed as the director of engineering at Google, the position he is still occupying today. And according to a report at MIT, in the MIT Technology Review, his scope has actually expanded. He is in charge of all the research in artificial intelligence at Google, okay? The Guardian quotes Larry Page, one of the founders of Google, saying, "We'll give you independence, but you will also have all the Google scale resources." And those resources are quite amazing. I don't know if you've read about this, but Google has been buying left and right. It was been on a shopping spree, buying robotic companies, artificial intelligence companies. They paid almost $1 billion for 2 startups, the DeepMind and Magic Leap. They bought DeepMind outright for close to $500 million. They invested more than $500 million in the Magic Leap recently. $1 billion for 2 startups. When they bought DeepMind, they announced, a year and a half ago, they announced that they will have an ethics board on the issues of artificial intelligence. Well, I Googled Google Ethics Board last night. Guess what I found? There's no information about it. Oh, wait, there was information. A couple of weeks ago, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal in which they said that Google spokesman declined comment on the ethics board. The founders of Google have famously said, "Don't do evil" will be our motto, and I have no reason to doubt that. But Google is a company. And a company is not a person, no matter what our Supreme Court would say on that topic. A company is an algorithm. A company is an algorithm which has a utility function, which is called profit. So how do you expect to contain this research? How could you expect to remember who we are if you have, as the head of your research in artificial intelligence, someone like this? But I don't want to pick on Mr. Kurzweil. It's almost like, because I want to be honest with you. He's me, I am a mathematician. It's hard to talk about this. It's hard to admit it, but I was like this once, I know, and now I know why. I never believed that I was a machine, really. Because that's what, when you say you will transfer and so on, right, your mind, it means you are believing that you're a machine. I didn't believe it, but I wasn't sure. I wasn't quite sure. But, there is a reason for that. There is a reason for that. And in my book, love and math, I talk about my experience as a 16-year-old when I applied to Moscow University to become a mathematician. This was my passion. I wanted to become a mathematician. And I was failed at the entrance exam. I was ruthlessly failed because of anti-Semitism, the policy of anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union of that era. And it wasn't just that they would say, oh, you're Jewish, my father is Jewish, so you're Jewish, we cannot take you. No, they would try to destroy you. They would try to show you, to convince you, a 16-year-old boy, that I'm not good enough. They want to break you. They wanted to break you. In my year, 1984, George Orwell, not a single Jewish sounding, a student with a Jewish sounding name like mine was accepted. Hundreds, thousands of students were failed ruthlessly. My exam, oral exam, lasted for more than 4 hours. And they failed me because they gave me questions which were not given to other students, much harder. They were called coffin problems. Coffin. So they wanted to put me in a coffin and put the nails and bury me there. But I told myself, I survived. Obviously, I survived. I went to technical school. I started doing research at a young age. I published papers which became known when I was 19. At age 21, I was invited by Harvard to be a visiting professor, 5 years after my exam. And I always told myself a story how I was so strong that I was able to persevere and overcome these terrible obstacles. It took me 30 years to learn what really happened that day. I was asked to speak about this in New York last year in September. And the night before, I wrote about it in my book. It was my story. I knew the story. I knew what happened to me. Turns out I knew it in the third person. I did not know the pain. I disconnected myself from the emotion, from the pain of that boy. And he was waiting for me for 30 years to come back, to search for him, to give him my hand and to bring him back, to give him my love and to bring him back. And when I finally connected to him, when he told me what happened, it was a totally different story. It was like a tsunami that came and literally overwhelmed me for some time. Connecting to that pain and knowing that actually he wasn't fine. He died. He died at that moment. This was a very traumatic experience. There's no other way to say it. He refused to accept it. I refused to accept it when I was 16. When we are small, when we are children, we cannot accept this kind of pain. So what do? We cut it off. We split. I left that boy there, frozen, and continued to move on. But then, to survive, I had to sever my emotional connections to him. I had to sever my emotional connections to the world. I had to feel more secure. I had to feel more safe. I had to have illusion of control. Therefore, I only relied on my logic, on my thinking, because my logical mind was constantly telling me, don't look there, don't look there, don't look there. It's a defense mechanism. Obviously, who wants to connect to their pain? But the pain is still there. We push it in the unconscious. So when I connected to this pain, I let it out. We can do that. Nobody told me that, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that it was possible. I'm telling you now, it is possible to connect. It is possible to regain, to give our children, our little ones, our love, and bring them back. And that's when you start seeing what's going on. Our logical mind working overtime to steer us away from our pain. Because to be human is to be exposed to joy and happiness and laughter, but also pain, sadness. Have you seen Inside Out? It was about me, when I saw those islands of her memory crumbling down. It was me. And so I had to do it, I had to cut it off to survive. The way 400 years ago, Cartesianism was our way to survive, to break into mind and body and me and you, to survive. But the time now is to feel whole again. That's why love and math. Not love is math. Not math is love. We need both. And then, of course, some memories stay as memories, but not at emotional levels. So I discovered some memories when I was a little boy, much younger, which I completely erased from my memory. And then, of course, if I don't want to experience pain, I would like to transform myself into a robot, because I know that the robot doesn't experience pain, doesn't feel the pain. But that's what makes us human. And we can connect to it. We can let it out. We can accept reality the way it is. And we can build a better world, a better reality together. It's always when we talk about this kind of topics, it's very easy to get bogged down in technical arguments, in theoretical arguments. He said this, and she said that, and then it becomes this mental gymnastics. So I don't have time for this, but it's very real. It's not a theoretical question anymore, the AI weapons and the danger. But I want to leave you with this thought. Pascal said, the heart has reasons that reason knows not at all. Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. But we have a choice. It's our choice to know who we are, to remember who we are, to answer this question, who am I? Or maybe more concretely, am I a human or a machine? Is there a difference between a human and a machine? Because if we don't answer that question to ourselves, each of us, then we are secretly enabling Ray Kurzweil and others to lead us to the precipice. It's our choice. And we can do it. Time to wake up. Thank you.
Fantastic talk.
Oh, it's wonderful.
You're at a top level. Your fear that do not think about humans, we are at the deep level you've talked about, that we could create some sort of beings up in the cloud, but they will be truncated and partial and not fully human. So that is the deception you're worried about. Because we can do something.
Well, that's right. So already there are dangers of AI weapons, which I didn't have time to talk about, self-guided weapon systems. But I like an example. Yesterday, Sherry Turkle spoke here, She's a professor at MIT who studies the interactions between humans and robots. And he told this amazing story about a little girl who was asked to interact with a robot. And she was very upset after that interaction. And they said, why? And she said, because I think the robot didn't like me. But the little girl didn't quite understand that it was a robot. They tried to explain, but she was very disappointed. And Sherry said, the poor kid was eating cookies one after another, you know? So, and she made a great point. The robots cannot teach us empathy, but they can do us harm. They can do us damage. That's what happens. But so when we say, you know, so there is this very, very real danger. But the point is, sometimes people start talking about safeguards. Let's formalize morals. Let's create a program, an algorithm which will describe morals. Well, you know, excuse me, Kant already proved that it's not possible. And now Gödel proves that it's not possible. So yes, okay, we can do research in this area, but, you know, everything can be hacked. You can create safeguards, but this is illusory safeguards. This is because somebody can always come and find a way to circumvent. The only thing which will be our safeguard is when each of us, not somebody else, not these other people, because I'm fine, it's about other people. No, when I remember who I am, that's when I will not allow those machines to do me harm. That's when I will use, by the way, don't think that I'm against AI. I love it. I use artificial intelligence all the time. Google Translate, you know, all these Amazon algorithms which make great suggestions. I have my Kindle here with me, you know, an iPhone. I love it, as long as these algorithms are at the service of humanity and not the other way around. But we can do that. And so the bad news is that we will never be able to legislate it. We will never be able to legislate it. But the good news is that we don't need to. All we need is to look inside. I suppose my time is up. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience. I love you. And I'll be happy to answer any questions just outside of the auditorium.